Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. This is Muhammad Imran. Some of the listeners and viewers have requested to upload a video on conditional sentences. So today, here we are with conditional sentences in English grammar. The topic is very informative, very useful, and very important, especially for those who are trying to appear in competitive examinations or interviews. Let me share with you one of my experience regarding the importance of conditional sentences. It was 2019 when I appeared for Public Service Commission interview before the panel. So one of the interviewer asked me that complete this sentence. If I dash the President of Pakistan. I completed and corrected the sentence. Even the panel asked me more questions also related to linguistics and literature. And then later on, the panel recommended me as a successful candidate. But I couldn't join the post due to some reason. So the purpose of telling you this story is that how important conditional sentences are in our practical life and competitive examinations as well as in interviews. So I hope that you will enjoy this lecture a lot. So let's start. First of all, we will highlight the main objectives of this session. The first objective is to understand conditional sentences and their usages. The second is to understand the different types of conditional sentences. And the last one is to evaluate the problems students face using conditional sentences in writing and speaking. What are conditional sentences? So here we will define conditional sentence. A conditional sentence expresses something that must happen or to be true if another thing is to happen or to be true. How? We will explain now. A conditional sentence is one that begins with if or unless and expresses something that must be true or happen before something else can be true or happen. It means that in order to happen something, there is condition for that. And until and unless that condition is not fulfilled, something cannot happen. So if you want that something to happen or something to be true, you have to fulfill that condition in prior. So let's discuss in detail now. Now let me give you an example. If it rains, I take umbrella. Now taking umbrella will happen only if something else is true or happen, and that is what? That is rain. So in order that I take umbrella, for taking this umbrella or to happen this situation, so there is need of another situation, and that is what? That if it rains. So if it rains is called if clause or conditional clause. I take umbrella is called main clause or result clause. We will discuss this in detail in coming slides. Here we have some more examples of conditional clause. Now, conditional clauses are typically introduced by subordinating conjunction if. If you want to know or if you want to identify or label a conditional clause, you have to look at subordinating conjunction if, because typically a conditional clause is introduced by a subordinating conjunction if. Here we have some example. If it is not too expensive, we will buy it straight away. So in order to happen this one, we will buy it straight away. Something else needs to happen. That is what? That is if it is not expensive. So if it is not expensive, it is a condition for what? For this, we will buy it straight away. So this we will buy straight away will happen if this condition is fulfilled. Second example. If you leave right now, you will be able to catch the last train. So you will be able to catch the last train only if certain conditions are fulfilled. And this is condition. If you leave right now, and if you don't leave right now, you won't be able to catch the last train. So in order to happen this one, something else needs to happen, and this is this one. Third example. If Tom passes his driving test, he will soon be buying a car for sure. So Tom will soon be buying a car if something else happens. And that is what? That is if Tom passes his driving test. So in conditional sentence, then we have two clauses. One is called if clause, this one, or we call it conditional clause, and one is called main clause or result clause. So this result clause will happen only if certain conditions are fulfilled. Right? I hope you got it. Let's move to next slide now. Structuring conditional sentence. How to structure a conditional sentence. Now, the most common type of conditional sentence has two clauses, a main clause and subordinate clause. So in conditional sentence, we will have two clauses, a main clause and a subordinate clause. Now, a subordinate clause begins with if or a similar word. Now, the if clause contains a preposition known as the condition, and the result clause contains a preposition stating what happens if condition is fulfilled. Now, the conditional sentence has the meaning if X occurs, then Y occurs. A typical example is shown below. So, we say if Ahmad leaves now, he will arrive at the airport in time to make his flight. So in order that Ahmad arrives at the airport in time to make his flight, now there is a condition for this. What is condition? Condition is that if Ahmad leaves now, and if Ahmad doesn't leave now, so he won't be able to arrive at the airport in time to make his flight. Now, if Ahmad leaves now is called a conditional clause, and he will arrive at the airport in time to make his flight, it is called a result clause. So this is called a conditional clause, this is called a subordinate clause, and this is called a main clause, and this is called a result clause. Here's a question that which clause should be placed initially. In spoken English, there is no preference for one clause or the other in initial position. So it means that in conditional sentence, we have two clauses. One is called if clause and one is called main clause. The question is that which clause should be placed first and which clause should be placed second. So in spoken English, no matter that which clause you place first, it's all right. But in written English, the tendency is a little bit different. So if clause to occur first, in written English, it's better to place if clause first and main clause second. While when you speak, so no matter that which clause occurs first, it's up to you. So there are alternative to if clause. Provide that as long as assuming that for convenience we use if clause even when the clause has an alternative to if. So it means that if has alternative. What are the alternative? Provide that as long as assuming that we have these alternative of if. But for convenience, even if these alternatives do exist, still we use if because if is preferable. If clause plus result clause. Here further explanation. A conditional sentence typically consists of an if clause which presents a condition and a result clause. Here we have some more example that if it rains, I go for a long drive. Now, I go for a long drive. There is a condition. What is that? If it rains. So if it doesn't rain, I don't go for drive. If I have some free time, I read my favorite novels. So in order to read my favorite novel, there is a condition for that. What is that? That if I have some free time. So if it rains is called if clause. I go for a long drive is called result clause. If I have some free time is called if clause or conditional clause. I read my favorite novel is called result clause or main clause. Types of conditional clauses. Conditionals are divided into three main types: open conditional clause, hypothetical conditional clause, and counterfactual conditional clause. So we will discuss in this lecture just open conditional clause, and other two types of clauses, other two types of conditional clauses will be discussed in coming two lectures. So the first type is a real condition, while the other two types show varying degree of remoteness. So we will discuss, our focus of this lecture is open conditional clause. Here we have a diagram of conditional sentences. So open conditional clause, hypothetical conditional clause, and counterfactual conditional clause. Open conditional clause, which is also called a real conditional. The focus of this session of this lecture is to discuss in detail open conditional clause. So an open conditional is the real situation is said to be real or neutral in that it leaves open the possibility of being fulfilled. It means that a situation or a possibility is there. So the speaker does not know whether or not Ahmad will pass his driving test. For instance, an open condition implies futurity, and a future related outcome is typically marked by the modal verb in the main clause. Now the conditional structure is basically follows as if plus present tense. Here we have conditional is a conditional clause, and modal verb with future reference or some other alias operate in the main clause. Now here we have some examples. Type 1, if we hurry, we will catch the bus. If clause and main clause. If clause is in simple present tense, and main clause here we will have modal verb. If we hurry, we will catch the bus. If we miss it, there will be another one. And if it doesn't rain, we'll be having a picnic. And if I don't practice my golf, I won't get any better. So you can see in all these examples that this is a typical example of a real conditional clause. Here we have if clause, here we have main clause. In if clause, we use simple present tense, and in main clause, we use will. So if clause and main clause combined, we call it a conditional sentence. And like individually, we call it if clause and we call it main clause. So in if clause, if we hurry, this is if clause. It is conditional clause. We will catch the bus. So in order to catch the bus, we have to hurry. And if we don't hurry, we won't be able to catch the bus. So this is result clause. Result clause here, it is in like it is with modal auxiliary verb will. If we miss it is simple present tense. There will be another one. Again, here is use word will. And if it doesn't rain, simple present tense, we will be having a picnic. So in order to have a picnic, there is a condition. What? If it doesn't rain. And if I don't practice my golf, I won't get any better. In order to get better score, better result, I need what? I need practice. So Practice is a condition for having a better score or better result. Now, the verb in the if clause, e.g. hurry, is in the simple present tense, not the future. Note, if we will hurry, we will catch the bus. But we can use will in the if clause when we make a request. Otherwise, remember that we can't use will in if clause. In if clause, if there is type 1 conditional clause, or if it is open conditional clause, so we will use in if clause all the time present tense, simple present tense or present tense. We can't use will in if clause, but we can use will in if clause if you are making a request. But we can use will in the if clause when we make a request. For example, it's a request. If we will hurry, so you are making a kind of request that please get hurry or please get up hurry, right? So it's a kind of request. Now, if you will just wait a moment, I will find someone to help you. So it means that if you will just wait, it means please wait a moment. So again, there is a request. So only in the case of request, you can use will in if clause. Otherwise, you can't use will in if clause. Now, we can use the present tense, e.g. are doing, or the present perfect tense, have done in the if clause, but we can't use will in the if clause. Will is only used if you're making a request. If we are expecting visitor, the flat will need a good clean. If you have finished with the computer, I'll put it away. The use of other models in the main clause. The main clause often has will, but we can use other modal verb. For example, can. If you haven't got a television, you can't watch it, can you? If Henry jogs regularly, he might lose weight. If Matthew is going to a job interview, he should wear a tie. So it means that we can use in the main clause other modal auxiliary verbs such as can, such as might, and such as should, but these modals are not typically used in if clause. Now, the if clause usually comes first, but it can come after the main clause. If I hear any news, I'll phone you. I'll phone you if I hear any news, but it is typically possible in spoken English. But when you write, it is better to place if clause first and main clause second. If you heat water, it boils. We sometimes use the present simple in both clauses. So sometime before practice, we saw that in the if clause we use simple present tense, and in the main clause we use future tense, or we use some modal auxiliary verbs. But here we will see that sometimes it is possible to use the simple present tense in both clauses, in if clause and main clause. If you heat water, it boils. And most often we use present tense in both clauses when we talk about facts. Now, if Daniel has any money, he spends it. And if you press this switch, the computer comes on. Now, this means that one thing always follows automatically from another. Now, pressing the switch always results in a computer coming on. Now, habitual meaning and facts. As I told you that most often when we have two simple present tense in two clauses, so it shows habitual facts, habitual and facts. Now, habitual meaning and facts can be expressed by the present tense in both the if clause and the main clause. If you pour oil on water, it floats, or it will float. In open conditions, the simple past tense is also possible with reference to a past event. If you have just heard it on the late night news, it will be in all the papers tomorrow. The main clause generally makes a statement, but it can be a question and imperative too. If she lives next door to you, how is it you never see her? You see that main clause, most of the time the main clause it is statement, but it can be also a question here. Like if she lives next door to you, how is it you never see her? And if you insist on staying, kindly take a seat over there. It's imperative. So in the main class, we can use imperative, we can use question, but most often we use statements. The use of unless in open conditional. In open condition, unless can often be used with the meaning of except if, with a similar meaning of similar meaning to if not. Unless Tom passes his driving test, he won't be buying a car yet. It means that if Tom doesn't pass. So unless gave the meaning of except if, but it has the similar meaning of if not. So if Tom doesn't pass, if Tom doesn't pass. So there will be no newspaper tomorrow unless the strike is called off. So it means that if the strike is not called off, unless give the meaning of if not. It means except if, but similar to if not. So there will be no newspaper tomorrow unless the strike is called off. It means that if the strike is not called off, there will be no newspaper tomorrow. Don't use unless in question. Typically, we don't use unless in question. In question, if not is used as an example 1 where unless is ungrammatical. The same applies to a statement within the context of surprise is. Now, where is she staying if not with her parents? So unless with her parents, that is ungrammatical here. So where is she living if not with her parents? You can't say where is she living unless with her parents. So it means that in question we can't use unless. Now I shall be surprised if the flight is not cancelled. Again, if there is the verb surprise, so you can't use also unless, because unless would be ungrammatical here. I shall be surprised unless the flight is cancelled. So the asterisk marks ungrammatical. It means that we can use unless in statement, but we can't use unless in question and with the verb surprise. Thank you so much for watching this video. This was an introduction to conditional clauses, and we talk in detail about type 1 conditional clause, and in coming lectures we will discuss type 2 and type 3 conditional clauses. So please keep watching. Thank you so much.